the north and rebalance the economy. What do we need to restore confidence? Too many people are not sure of, or as we work from home, how do we kickstart those major transport infrastructure structure and investment? What transport innovation and infrastructure does the North need to prioritise? What's most important? What do we need to do now? Will the Transport Accelerator Council be the rocket booster required to deliver major transport plans in the North? What kind of jobs, skills and training do we need to build back better transport and connectivity? How do we decarbonise transport and lead the way on net zero innovation and solutions? The hydrogen train, I think, was featured yesterday, and the plane. So it's all that bound to come up, I'm sure. What local government funding and support? I mean, local government has been hit very hard. Do we need to meet the challenge of changing travel demands and mitigate the risk caused by the pandemic? And ultimately, will the government commit to major transport infrastructure upgrades projects like HS2 in full and boost investor confidence? Now, we want everybody on the call to take part in this, and to help us actually answer and address these questions, I'm very pleased to introduce our stellar lineup, which is Lizzie Stewart, who's the Director of Transportation at Atkins, and she will be co-hosting with me. We're very lucky and fortunate to have Andrew Stevenson, Minister of State at the DfT and Rail Minister. Kevin Honrake, the MP for Thurston Moulton, also a big champion of the North, the Northern Powerhouse Rail, the Northern Powerhouse All-Party Parliamentary Group. Baroness Jenny Randerson, who's the Lib Dem spokesperson for Transport. Delighted to see Steve Broomhead, Chief Executive there at Warrington, and formerly of the Northwest Development Agency, and people will know him of old and new. Kate Jennings from the Railway Industry Association, David Hughes from Transport for the North, Mike Emmerich, who was so instrumental in the Greater Manchester Devolution deal in terms of metro dynamics. Jonathan Spruce, a good friend and interim director of TFN, and Lorna Pimlott, who is from HS2 and also a big champion of HS2 Phase 2B and 2A. So be interesting to hear what she has to say. No conversation about the North would be worth having if we didn't have Henry Murison from the Northern Powerhouse Partnership, and I'm also pleased to see Penny Marshall from Yorkshire and Humber there, from the Institution of Civil Engineers, Matthew Griggar, Public Affairs Manager at Associated British Ports, Tim Wood from the Northern Powerhouse Director at TFN, and also Angelica Sogia, who is a councillor from on the Greater Manchester Transport Committee. Hopefully, we have covered all bases, and we've got a pan-northern cast there. Very quickly on the agenda, we do have quite a lot to gallop through, but the focus will be on interaction, and we will be using Slido, so you can all take part in answering those key questions I referenced earlier. So the question, the housekeeping, very quickly, please do use the hashtags, tweet away, they're all there, take a note, very simple. Transport, keep your microphone on mute. I will do my best, as I've said, to bring people in, and if you can use the raise the hand function, that would be good. Audience members, I've said use the chat function, but again, we are using Slido, which if you haven't already installed it, we'll just go to that slide now, Emily. Hello. Emily, yeah, there we are. So all you need to do literally is take a picture of the QR and you'll be in there. If you've already downloaded slido.com, you just sign in with hashtag 22082. So I will be looking at the chat. I'll also be looking at Lizzie, my co-host, to check who's who and what's what. So I think without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Lizzie to set out the context from Atkins before we get started, and then we'll go straight to the Minister. Thanks, Lizzie.
Great, thank you, Jill. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. Well, welcome everybody. We're absolutely delighted to have so many guests and participants today at this panel discussion. And we felt it was really, really important to focus on the North when we were building back better. And the reason for that is that the transformational opportunity that the North presents to our economy is eye-watering. The opportunity exists to grow the Northern economy by the order of £100 billion, creating as many as 850,000 jobs. Through shrewd investments in transport, science, innovation, the arts and technology in the North, we perhaps have the answer to our economic woes in our hands. Today, we focus on how transport investments in the North will help us to build back better from COVID. The success of the North relies heavily on good, efficient and reliable inter-regional transport connectivity, particularly east-west and trans-Pennine corridors. Existing transport infrastructure, particularly rail for many, is an uneconomic and unattractive necessity. So this is our opportunity to work together to build back better. At Atkins, we ran a post-COVID survey, which showed that transportation companies have seen over a quarter of their work reduced, postponed or cancelled, with private sector businesses reporting an average 31% drop in their revenues. Now, while road usage is increasing, before the second wave measures, we saw road traffic during weekdays return to 96% of pre-COVID levels and over 100% at the weekends. We've also seen public transport figures still far below where they were pre-COVID. Our recent survey showed that in the transportation sector, only half of respondents expect the industry to recover to pre-crisis levels by the end of 2021. And I think many would agree that that even now is looking quite optimistic. To build back better in terms of transport, we're in a long road to recovery. But what that long road gives us is the opportunity to reassess, to rethink, to reimagine the way we work and redefine why our transport is so essential to the UK, both to the people and to the economy. What we're looking at now is not just build, 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 but how we can build back better. So we're here today to look at how we can accelerate those transport schemes when funding is challenged, how we make those hard choices, how we accelerate that investment. The government's Northern Transportation Acceleration Council is a welcome step towards this, and it promises not only increased levels of investment in projects, but a new way of delivering these so that they avoid costly overruns. At Atkins, our priority is how we enable and accelerate green schemes. These include electrification of the railway, bringing in more energy efficient trains, for example, hydrogen, future mobility projects that embrace connected and autonomous vehicles, and helping our clients to make the wise choices in their investment decisions, in their policies, in their projects that accelerate our path to net zero. I'm perhaps most looking forward to discussing this green recovery with you all. Alongside this, excuse me, is our commitment to creativity, to innovation, and to leading a step change in both the productivity and performance of the construction industry. The sought-after investment from government must be treated as sacred, with firm strategies in place to deliver schemes on budget and on time at the very least. And the returns on these precious investments must be managed throughout the design and delivery process so that the local stakeholders and economies receive all of the promises made to them. Our experience on the A14 shows that major infrastructure projects can be delivered to budget and even ahead of time, with this specific scheme opening, in fact, 8 months early. Two proven ways to bring the step up needed in the delivery of these schemes are technology and diversity. The infrastructure sector, and more specifically the construction sector, is ripe for disruption, with productivity levels stagnating at very low levels for decades. We must get to a digitally enabled transport network that is underpinned by consistent, meaningful data, which becomes easier and more efficient to manage. And we must continue to invest in the skills and the technology to create a fully digitally enabled design and delivery process that again is underpinned by data and enables optimal decision making when it comes to spending those precious government pounds, creating greater surety of on time, on budget delivery, with the most carbon efficient option being selected. Now, it has been proven time and again that diverse teams are more creative, more innovative, can better manage risk and deliver better financial outcomes. From McKinsey to London Business School, the evidence is compelling, yet our industry struggles to bring those diverse perspectives and experiences into the design and delivery of these schemes, and we all suffer for it. Our strategies, our leadership, and our culture have been found wanting in this industry, and this must change. We must use the economic carnage created by COVID as the catalyst for this change. We cannot afford to wait any longer. Our economy, our country needs that innovation, that creativity, and much better financial outcomes, perhaps most critically in the North. Again, I'm delighted to be discussing this most important topic with the panellists here today. So with no further ado, let's get started. Start this critical discussion on skills, on decarbonisation, on investment, on funding powers, and the very future of Northern Transport. Thank you, Jill.
Thank you, Lizzie. That's great, and I think you've really set the scene there, and also a great intro for the minister, Andrew. Welcome very much to. Great to have you here. As you know, we're answering some of the big questions today about how we're going to build back better transport in the Northern Powerhouse. So I'd be interesting, and we're all very keen to hear what you've got to say. So welcome, Andrew.
Smashing. Well, good morning, Jill, and thank you, Lizzie, for your remarks. And first of all, an apology from me. I'm in the Department of Transport today, and we currently have an office refurb going on. We are trying to build back better. So if there is drilling in the middle of my speech, please just ignore it. We've told them to continue with the work, so it does occasionally cause embarrassing moments on these kind of Zoom calls, so apologies for that. First of all, thank you to Atkins for hosting this event and bringing together such a high quality panel of people to discuss what is such an important issue. Obviously, everyone will be aware that we are currently in the process of redoubling our efforts to sadly deal with the resurgence of COVID-19. But that cannot allow us to be distracted from our vital job of ensuring that the economy of the North continues to grow and prosper, and ensure that the virus does not deflect from the government's key goal, as stated in the last general election, of levelling up the North of England. As the Prime Minister said in a speech at the end of June, he's pledged to put infrastructure at the heart of the government's programme for growth as we recover from the COVID-19 crisis. It is a rebuilding challenge that will perhaps be bigger than any we have faced as a country since the end of the Second World War. 3/4 of a century ago, it was the collective spirit of the country that turned despair into hope, tragedy into opportunity. Instead of being cowed by the scale of the problems we faced after the Second World War, we set about fixing them, building new schools, new roads, new hospitals and housing. We renewed the fabric of our nation. And in that process, we created millions of new jobs. Today, as we set about on the biggest economic restructuring programme since that time, we have a chance to take an honest look at our infrastructure, at the way it's been planned and delivered, and some of the mistakes made by successive governments over decades. As Lizzie said, we need to not just build, but to ensure that we build back greener, faster and better. And in the process, help businesses get back on their feet and level up our country. We can only do that by investing in a better connected Britain, in roads and railways, ports and airports, trams and trains. The arteries that bind us together, that feed business activity at every level and plug us into the global economy. Yes, we are a wealthy country. We cannot claim, though, to be a particularly equal or an efficient one. Our congested roads, our ageing railways, and our polluted cities are a drag on economic growth, and some regions can feel completely cut off from jobs and investment because they are poorly served by transport. If there's a criticism of the way that we rebuilt after the Second World War, it's that it didn't benefit the whole country in the same way. Our great northern cities didn't recover in the way that the prosperous southeast did. And one of the reasons for that is that our northern cities remained poorly connected to each other and to the rest of Britain. That's got to change. Governments have been promising to rebuild the North's transport infrastructure for decades and have failed to deliver. Now it is this government that has to address the historic disparity in transport funding between North and South and has to finally deliver transport investment that will level up the region and get the North's economy moving once again. We are building on a record £13 billion investment in transport across the North, and proposed spending shows that at long last we will be spending more per head in the North than in the South. The Secretary of State for Transport has created the new Northern Transport Acceleration Council to deliver billions of pounds worth of projects, make the case for further investment, and give the North more control over its future. The council will be made up of mayors and local authority leaders from across the North, working with ministers from the Department for Transport. It will meet regularly to review the progress of projects and initiatives which are important to both local areas and the wider region. The council will work alongside the Treasury's Project Speed and the Department of Transport's Acceleration Unit to tackle delays to infrastructure projects and drive progress for northern transport users. But it's about action, not talk. The launch of the Northern Transport Acceleration Council was accompanied by a package of road and rail measures to deliver on regional priorities. For far too long, the Victorian infrastructure of the Castlefield Corridor in Greater Manchester has stifled journey times across the North. So we've invested more in new and longer trains, new platforms, redesigned junctions. The measures will unlock bottlenecks, tackle congestion and increase capacity by up to 38%. We've also provided £589 million to kickstart work on the first section of the Trans-Pennine route upgrade between York, Leeds, Huddersfield and Manchester, which will be used to kickstart electrification of the line and significantly increase capacity and help speed up trains and boost reliability. We've published the preferred route to complete the £1 billion dual carriageway on the A66 from Scotch Corner to Penrith, which will transform journeys on this critical artery. We've set out our plans to dual the A1 from the North East to Scotland. We've announced additional funding for infrastructure renewal on the Tyne and Wear Metro, and we've started work on the A63 upgrade in Hull. We're also delivering more investment in major northern conurbations through the Transforming Cities Fund to improve local connectivity. For example, new trams for Metrolink, a new station near Preston, and bus improvements in Sheffield, Leeds, Liverpool, and the North East. We're also supporting road investment in Cheshire with the Congleton, Poynton and Middlewich bypasses, the A500 dualling and the Warrington Western Link Road. And we're working with northern authorities to extend cycling and walking infrastructure as part of a £2 billion investment package, including the potential for the Queensbury Tunnel to be reborn as part of a green transport link linking Bradford with Halifax. This will help improve connectivity in an environmentally friendly way, whilst being a source of pleasure for generations of cyclists and walkers for many years to come. Despite COVID, 2020 is shaping up to be a historic year for rail in the North. In March, after consistent underperformance, Northern Rail was taken into public ownership to ensure the delivery of reliable services. At the end of this year, we will publish a new integrated rail plan setting out how we will build Northern Powerhouse Rail, HS2 and other projects across the North. This plan will further consider the scope of the Trans-Pennine route upgrade, including whether the project should be extended to include extra tracking, digital signalling and the full electrification of the route between Manchester, Leeds and York. We have committed to getting HS2 to the north, prioritising progress on the western leg of Phase 2B, with the ambition of depositing a bill for the route from Crewe into Manchester in Parliament by early 2022. We are pushing ahead with other schemes too. We are building a new platform and upgrading signalling at Leeds Station to maximise the potential for the Trans-Pennine route upgrade. We've invested £15 million in 3 rail stations across the North East, Hordern, Darlington and Middlesbrough. And as part of the £500 million Restoring Your Railways Fund, the DfT is also assessing bids from across the north of England to rebuild and reopen stations and lines closed during the Beechings cuts of the 1960s and 1970s. But this is not just about rebalancing infrastructure investment. It's also about the way we build too, as was said in the introduction. Why is it that large transport projects are so difficult to deliver in this country? Why are they so often late and over budget? Why can't we summon up the collective resolve to do big projects better? We did it when we built the North Railway infrastructure at lightning speed 2 centuries ago. We recently did it when we constructed the nation's motorway network, including the great engineering feat of taking the M62 across the Pennines. And we even did it this year when we built the Nightingale hospitals in just 10 days, fitted with ventilators to treat thousands of COVID patients. Of course, we can do it. There are some great examples. The A14, which has already been referenced, it's not in the north of England, I know, but it is a great example to cite. It was supposed to be opening in December this year, yet despite its scale and complexity, this £1.5 billion mega project opened 7 months early. Among the innovations used during construction were autonomous dumper trucks, 3D modelling, and building key structures off-site so they could be wheeled in at the right moment. The A14 is a testament to what we can achieve when we work together and we put innovation at the heart of what we do. These are lessons that must be harnessed much more widely across infrastructure if we're going to achieve our objectives as we recover from COVID. They're lessons that we need to apply to HS2. They're lessons that will help us deliver Northern Powerhouse Rail. And they're lessons that will resonate with the Department for Transport, because we've announced a new acceleration unit within the DfT to follow the A14's lead and fire up major transport projects. It will work in tandem with the Northern Transport Acceleration Council, dedicated to levelling up infrastructure across the north, getting to grips with problems that cause delays, bringing down barriers to successful delivery, and helping transport learn from other industries. The COVID crisis has challenged us all over the past 6 months, and certainly challenged those of us within government. It strengthened our commitment to level up the north of England and to building back better. It's made us re-examine how we do things and ask how we can do them better, greener and faster. And now it's time for us to deliver for the north of England. It's the fight for jobs, for inward investment, for business confidence, and there is no time to lose. Not for generations has transport had such a profoundly critical role to play in the fate of the nation as it does right now. And in the same way that critical workers have stepped up in recent months, now infrastructure must step up too, to invest and innovate, rebuild and reconnect so the whole of Britain can share in our recovery. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Andrew, it's really great to get that sort of view from you, which is that the government does have that ambition. And I think today what we want to do is to sort of help you as much as anybody else to sort of answer some of the key issues and concerns that we have. And the key words that have already been used so often is that keyword is acceleration. And I think Lizzie also mentioned the word risk and how we manage that risk going forward in such unprecedented times, to coin a very well used phrase. So I just wanted to know how long you got with us, and if you can take a few questions.
I'm happy to take a few questions. I can only stay with you for another 10 minutes, sadly. I'm back to back with meetings.
That's great. I'm going to go back to Lizzie straight away and ask Lizzie to pose a question to you. Lizzie.
Great, thank you, Jill. Thank you very much, Andrew. That was a really great outline, I suppose, in terms of where we are strategically and the path for the way ahead. I'm particularly interested around Project Speed. And for me, I always see kind of two elements of Project Speed. One is absolutely the supply chain stepping up, innovation, new ideas, embracing technology, creativity, moving schemes forward. The other element that I see is, I suppose, the decision-making and governance process. And I actually have a lot of empathy at the moment for those who have to make decisions, because there's a lot of uncertainty around demand, around business cases. But what we need is quick, fast decision making to get going. That has an inordinate impact on the schemes and our ability to go fast, to be cheap. And I'm just curious, I suppose, what's coming out from Project Speed in terms of that decision making angle of things, and what's going on from that angle.
Okay, Andrew.
I think it's a really great question, and there's a balance that has to be struck. The Infrastructure and Projects Authority and others have looked in detail in the past about how projects are initiated correctly, how we choose the right projects, how we move forward with projects. But then we have to recognise that even when a government decides that they're going to move ahead with something, there is then a huge amount of delay and bureaucracy. The 5-case business model of getting anything approved by the Treasury. But then planning consents, HS2 phase 1, we have shovels in the ground now. As of this month, the Prime Minister was there with his shovel in September. We introduced the legislation to give planning consent for phase 1 into Parliament in 2003. It took 4 years to pass through Parliament and was approved with royal assent in 2007. There's been 3 years of enabling work since. Can the north of England really afford to wait as long for the western leg or the eastern leg of HS2 or for various other schemes? We can't allow these things to drag. So certainly, to answer the question, looking at some of these constraints both within government and how we get planning consents through, whether it be transport works orders, DCOs, or hybrid bills, how we can make that more efficient will be a key focus of Project Speed and the acceleration unit in the Department of Transport.
Thanks, Andrew. I've got a couple of questions. I'm going to bring Henry Murison in from the Northern Powerhouse Partnership, who I'm sure you know, but I've also got a few quick questions in the chat, which you might want to also address. We've got from Jake Kelly, civil engineering contractors. For the Minister, can we have further clarification on how the Northern Transport Acceleration Council will work with TfN to deliver the government's vision? And also from Laurie Quinn, which is a bit naughty question, but a good one from my point of view. Can the Minister update us on the status of the devolution and recovery white paper and impacts? So there we are. But Henry, if you could come in and we'll come back to those other two questions.
My question, Andrew, was about the delivery body for High Speed North, which obviously includes Northern Powerhouse Rail. A number of us in the North have been very keen for that to be different in design to HS2, to learn some of the lessons. Is a model like that for the Olympic Delivery Authority, so something much more arm's length from government, being considered? And would that potentially allow us to get some of that private sector expertise more front and centre, rather than needing to maybe employ as many people and have such a large structure and bureaucracy to be able to deliver a project?
So to take those questions in turn, Henry's first. I think on delivery bodies, it's really important that we get this right. Most people will know that the Oakervey review recommended that the HS2 programme was just too vast for HS2 Limited. Euston should be taken away from HS2 Limited, and the northern sections, phase 2B, should be taken away from HS2 Limited as well. We've agreed with those recommendations. We are currently in process of setting up first, as the biggest priority, the Euston Delivery Board. The reason for that simply is because the Euston redevelopment is part of the phase 1 programme, and therefore we incorporate a huge amount of risk into the delivery of phase 1 unless we prioritise that. But at the same time, we are looking at how we deliver 2B. Some of that's tied up in the integrated rail plan, but in terms of what the delivery body looks like, quite often we talk about innovation in terms of product, services or process. I think actually organisational innovation is something we quite often overlook. Let's not just create another body which is a mirror image of HS2 Limited or many of the other arm's length bodies of the Department of Transport. Let's look at really what is required and what would be fit for purpose. So at the moment, we've taken no firm view on that, but I'm really keen to hear suggestions from all sorts of different people about what that delivery body would look like. I don't just want to create another HS2 Limited in order to deliver phase 2B. In terms of Northern Transport Acceleration Council, Northern Council, NTAC, call it what you will, and their relationship with Transport for the North, they will be working very closely together. They've got to work closely together. This was done in consultation with Transport for the North. I can understand completely why some people would perceive that there's going to be a rivalry, but that's not what the Secretary of State wants to see happen. He wants to see close collaborative working. So in the coming weeks and months, I'm sure you will hear more about that and you will see some really great partnership working. In terms of the devolution white paper, that is a matter from my ministerial colleagues in MHCLG, so I'm going to dodge the question.
Ah, dear. Well, there's another one from another parliamentary colleague here, Kevin Hollingrake, who's obviously showing his true Yorkshire colours in there. Well done, Kevin. But he asked, what progress have we made on reforming the Green Book methodology? I suspect you might dodge that one too, Andrew.
No, so this is a great question. There is work going on in the Treasury. I think the Treasury have been slightly snowed under over the past 6 months for reasons that we all know about. But work, I am assured, is going on in the Treasury. I think also, realistically, and I think the National Infrastructure Commission is looking very much at this as part of the Integrated Rail Plan. When you look at transport investments in the north of England, the strategic case for them, it is really what should hold sway and what should help with the rankings. Yes, you know, we always have to have an eye on the economic case and how we actually deliver and how to afford these projects, but we need to look at strategic transport investments, particularly at a time when, you know, passenger numbers are down dramatically at the moment. They're likely to be down for some period of time. Making things stack up in the conventional way will be even harder. So we've got to look at this. We've got to get the reform through. But even before the Treasury come out with revisions to the Green Book, I think there's more that we can do through bodies like Transport for the North and through the Department of Transport, arguing for the strategic case for investment in the north of England.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for your time today, and also for the very strong words of encouragement. I think reasons to be cheerful, but let's just get on with it and make sure we get that acceleration happening. That's so vitally important. I'm now we're going to switch to the heated debate with our stellar lineup of panelists who've all been asked to address a particular question, and people on the call can also join in on the Slido as the questions come up. So first on our list of speakers is Kevin Hollingrake, MP for Thirsk and Malton. And your question, Kevin, and comments to address was, what powers and investment do we need from government to unlock connectivity and growth across the north and rebalance the economy? It's a very big question, and there's a hint of that with regard to devolution, I suspect. So over to you.
Yes, yes, very keen to cover that one. And I thought it was a brilliant address from Andrew. It shows the extent of the work that's going on, the progress that's already been made. And really lots of ministers really get this. And lots of ministers we have now in key positions within cabinet or in senior ministerial positions who are from the north, which is very refreshing. And not least our Chancellor, of course, representing my neighbouring seat. But ever since I joined Parliament in 2015, I had kind of on my little mini manifesto was we need a fairer deal for the north, and a better term for that, I guess, is levelling up, which is obviously the government's kind of moniker for all this, and totally believe in that we've just been left behind for so long. I think what we've got to understand, I guess, is the scale of the problem. The scale of the problem is massive. This is not about what one government's done for a few years. It's been decades and decades and decades of underinvestment. And the best analogy that I can use on this, and I use this quite a lot with with the Chancellor and other people and previous Chancellor as well, is look at East and West Germany. The disparity there when the reunification of East and West Germany, massive disparity, economic disparity between East and West Germany. And it took, it's still not equal yet, but it's a lot more equal than it was. It took 2 decades and £2 trillion to address those problems. So, yes, I mean, at the scale of the problem, just back to, I mean, GDP per head in London is 45,000 quid, in the northeast 18,000 pounds. We're bottom of the table, near the bottom of the table in terms of regional disparities. I think Andrew said actually we're one of the richest countries in the world. I think in terms of GDP as a nation, we're fifth in the league, 5th or 6th in the league table. We kind of flip-flop with France. But GDP per capita, we are 27th in the world. So there's something fundamentally wrong, and it means the UK is not firing on all cylinders, and that's what we need to do. So the prize is huge. So yes, we absolutely need to make sure we get more powers and more investment. And I agree with you entirely, Jill. You know, this has got to be, devolution is a key part of this. We see some great people leading the agenda in places like West Midlands with Andy Street, Andy Burnham in Manchester, Ben Houchen in Tees Valley, people who are real inspirational characters who are really going to look out for the best interests of their areas. Massive believer in devolution. It's been a bit of a kind of a bone of contention, you might say, in Yorkshire, of course, how we do devolution in Yorkshire. But we're getting there. Sheffield's got its deal. We've got a York deal that's oven ready, you might say. So this will mean hopefully York City Region Mayor covering York and North Yorkshire by 2022, which should be great. If somebody can come along, hopefully somebody completely out with politics today, somebody can come in and say, this is what I want from my region, and we'll bang the table in Whitehall to say we want the powers, we want the money, exactly what people like Andy, the two Andys and Ben Houchen do. And so that's definitely a key part of it, but it can't just be powers, it's got to be money too. So this is critical to it. So yes, lots of public sector stuff, and we tend to focus on the public sector when we talk about this. So we talk about government investment in infrastructure, and I won't revisit what Andy said about all the stuff we're doing across infrastructure. I mean, one key to this is not just about connecting Manchester to Leeds, of course. We've got to connect all these places interregionally. So we've got to connect, yes, Manchester to Birmingham, York to Birmingham. That's the beauty of HS2, but also Manchester to Blackpool. You see where Brighton is closer, is further away from London than Blackpool is to Manchester. Yet it's 20 minutes shorter journey, and the frequency of services are threefold greater. So 3 times as often services between Brighton and London. That's why Brighton's prosperous. And Blackpool, one of the reasons Blackpool isn't. So yes, all that stuff's really, really important, and devolution, but we've got to also get the private sector investing. You can't just expect this all to happen from the public sector. It takes too long. We know we need to do this quickly for various reasons, but because of the imperative, but also this quickly. Just pure private sector stuff takes a long time, and the economic benefits take a long time. And as David Smith, who writes in the Sunday Times, and the Times are often an economist, acknowledges, and I think Mark Littlewood from the IEA, he makes a point, a very good article he wrote in the Times, which if this is all to do with connectivity, why isn't Doncaster more prosperous? Doncaster is a very, very well-connected place by rail, by road, but it's not very prosperous. So you've got to get the private sector coming in. So, and this is what they did in East and West Germany, in East Germany too. It was, yes, public sector investment, but lots of other things. So we should be rolling out things like super enterprise zones. So instead of enterprise zones typically being a business park, it should be the whole of a devolved region. So we look at the bottom quartile of devolved regions in terms of economic activity per capita, and say, right, all those areas, they should be super enterprise zones. So if companies who relocate there or scale up there, they're getting business rates, relief, complete relief, they're getting capital allowances, they're getting better planning rules. Free ports, obviously that's a government policy that's been rolled out. That's a similar thing, but Bishop Auckland is not on the sea, so it needs to be something for some of the inland areas as well. I would like to see enhanced tax breaks for something like enterprise investment scheme, where you're getting more incentives for private sector angel investors to invest in those regions to attract more investment into places like Darlington, Bishop Auckland, wherever else. And also, I think we need a different kind of banking sector. I do a lot of work in banks in this place, regional mutual banks. I'd love to see Germany, US, Canada, Japan all have regional mutual banks, which are not driven by the short-term imperatives of shareholders. They're driven by what's beneficial to the business community in those areas. I'd love to see a bank for the Tees Valley, regional mutual bank for Tees Valley. We used to have in the UK, we got rid of them all. SME mutual banks, they could be massive. They're starting to set up now, but we need some government support for those to pump prime them. So lots of things to do. Great, we're seeing the public sector investment, but let's get the private sector investing as well.
That's brilliant. Thank you. You're such a champion for the North and obviously for Yorkshire as well. And it's great to see the movement on devolution. You know, we share a dream there, Kevin, I think, in terms of what we want to do. I'm going to quickly move on to Baroness Randerson, who's the Lib Dem spokesperson for transport in the Lords. And your question is, which we've already talked about, or the Minister's already talked about, will the Northern Transport Accelerator Council be the rocket booster required to deliver major transport plans in the North? Jenny, over to you to answer that question and give us your thoughts.
Thank you very much. Well, the Minister highlighted a crucial problem that we face across the whole of the UK, which is our apparent paralysis when faced with a major infrastructure project. And what we do is to set up boards and organisations in place of actually putting a shovel in the ground. And therefore, you know, I start with a considerable level of cynicism about yet a new body. And overlaid on the problem that the Minister set out for us was that COVID presents a huge problem, a huge challenge in how it affects our travel habits. The danger is that we will just sink back into reliance on cars just when the environmental message was getting through and public transport was being taken seriously for the first time for a long time. So we've actually got to keep up the pressure that we can't go on making the roads more and more congested. You can't solve the problem of traffic congestion by building more roads, because evidence across the world shows more roads equal more cars. And so therefore, we've got to look at things in a different way as we build back better. There will be changes, however, in demand, new patterns working. We won't all go on work from home, but a lot more people will be able to do so, and there will be new patterns. So existing plans, where they are there, need to be reassessed. We also need to change the way the case for new transport projects is assessed. It isn't a case of setting up a new body, it's also a case of changing the way they work. And Kevin referred to the need to change the way we do things. We need a very much bigger place when we assess infrastructure projects. We need a very much big place for the potential for economic growth, the spin-out factor, the amount of new development that will come as a result. We have a back-to-front approach in Britain. We say you build some houses and then think how you link them. We've got to create the links and that will then serve those communities. And we've also got to look very much mostly at the environmental impact of what we're doing. So rather just as DFT does at the moment, which is to say, is this new rail line viable? Oh, well, let's see how many people use the current rail line. Let's add up the minutes it'd save if we built a new one. That is a completely sterile approach. You've got to look at the potential for growth. Now, the debate on northern infrastructure, I'm afraid, too often becomes a debate on HS2. And the whole key to the way in which we improve infrastructure in the north of England is to ensure HS2 stimulates the rest of North England, rather than being the government's answer that we spent so much money, so many billions on this, and you've got to be satisfied with it now. Now, one of the things that was striking me is that the contrast between travel patterns in many northern cities and in London. In London, we take public transport for granted, but in many northern cities, there is a lack of a robust transport network, and that is the key to development in the future. And going very specifically now, I finished towards the Northern Powerhouse concept. That's nearly 10 years old. And it's still, to my mind, the minister was talking to us about the government's plans, not about their achievements. So 10 years, and we have not seen the step change in development on the ground. Now, Transport for the North is well established, and I've had several presentations from them. What always concerned me was that lots of ideas, they've got lots of very good ideas and plans, but they remain at a high level in many cases. There's a lack of practical detail, and there is a lack of committed funding for those plans. A long time ago, I was, for 20 years, I was involved in local government. And my experience of local government is that it's very difficult to ensure cooperation and coordination of local authorities which have inevitably competing aspirations, inevitably competing interests. What makes it work, and it's brilliant when it works, I am a passionate devolutionist, but what makes it work is the commitment to money, the committed money put the money on the table and the cooperation follows. Because why should local authorities coordinate and cooperate and spend hours, years doing that if it's simply a plan? You've got to have that money for the development. My question, I asked a question recently, a written question of the government about Transport for the North and its role with the Northern Transport Accelerator Council. And I got a very disappointing answer. The answer said that Transport for the North advises the government. That is not the way round it should be.
Right.
If the Transport for the North had powers and a proper budget, it could deliver. It is not just, or should not be, just a government advisor. I'm sure that's not how it was envisaged when it was first set up.
Yeah.
So my concern about Northern Transport Accelerator Council is that it may just be yet another layer of bureaucracy, or it may have been created to solve the problems outlined. I don't know what was the purpose of it. But what we need, rather than another body, is a fully funded programme steered by local authorities, given the power, the devolved powers, to decide what they want as a priority in their region and fully empowered as a delivery authority. You need a body to deliver it. So if that's Transport for the North or the Accelerator Council, it's debatable, but you need the delivery authority. Thank you.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Jenny. I'm very conscious of time, but I think you've raised a very important question. I know the people on the call from Transport for the North will come back there, but it's a very good segue, I think, into Steve Broomhead in terms of your points around local government funding. So, Steve, can I bring you in now? And we do need to sort of speed up a bit as well and accelerate the discussion. So, Steve.
Well, well, good morning to you. I'm clear this is a time for reimagination, redesign, and some blue sky thinking, if there's any blue sky left to think at the moment. But by nature, I'm an optimist. I'll concentrate on some pragmatic issues. I mean, the first one, I think we should concentrate on delivery, not dithering. Some really encouraging words around acceleration. I think the government has a really strong set of ambitions and plans and policies around transport in the north, but we've got to move the shovel from being ready to get into action. Give two quick examples. Active travel funds are agreed and we have the early allocations. So at a very local level, we could make decisions on cycle lanes and pedestrianisation. The bulk of the rest of the funding to make a real difference at the local level has not been released so far. And the same with local cycling investment funds. It's over 12 months since we put in our plans, and those funds have not been delivered. So we need some colonic irrigation into getting the funds out of government where they've been allocated and policy been signed off by ministers to local government. The second point I'd make is there's been effectively the nationalisation of all public transport. And I think we should see nationalisation as a positive, embraced in a really positive way, make sure we get the right performance management and leadership to deal with nationalisation in action. We also look to municipalization of transport. You see this all the time in Europe. And in Europe, I think we'd all accept we have very high standards of public transport, better frequencies and better quality. And so I think that whole area around the intervention of the state into public transport needs to be celebrated. And we don't really want to go back to the messy business of franchising. The third point I make is, and it's already been made by a number of people, is the significance of devolution. I'm looking forward to seeing the Recovery and Devolution white paper this autumn. It will hopefully ensure that we end this problem of centralisation of transport planning within the Department of Transport. We can get some of the decisions and the funding out into more devolved authorities. I think that's a model we should be embracing, and I hope that there will be enough in it to get that going forward. I just hope it does not get knocked off the parliamentary timetable as a priority by other things. That will deliver levelling up and we'll move towards a more activist approach to investment in public transport. The last point I would make is the overall position of local government finance. You'll not be surprised for me to advise you that councils are feeling the pinch in terms of lost income and additional resources, and we will need a solution for that. One that's almost NHS style, where their debts and their financial issues were really written off at the start of the pandemic. Councils are reporting major difficulties around this issue. The reason I mention this in the context of public transport, a lot of schemes, such as pinch points and other schemes, require council contributions, which could only be raised through borrowing. That borrowing is through for a capital programme, but essentially the way the borrowing system works, it actually hits the revenue budgets of councils. It's the revenue budgets of councils that are under enormous pressure during COVID. So if you can't deal with the investment in public transport unless you write the revenue positions of councils. There's just a few thoughts from my windy railway station in Cumbria today. Thanks very much, Jill. Thanks.
Yeah. All right, Steve. We're not very far from each other. I've been many times to Dent railway station, so flying the flag. The highest railway station in Britain, isn't it?
Correct.
Yeah, there you are. Very good. So now quickly, I mean, don't forget to join on the Slido and give your comments because it will all be captured there. On the question that Baroness Randerson had, it was a lot of don't knows, and I think 20% of you thought that it would be the rocket booster, and I think so that's interesting. And the majority thought no. So interesting, a bit of scepticism, true northern scepticism there. So now I want to talk to Kate Jennings from the Railway Industry Association. What do we need to restore investor and consumer confidence and kickstart major transport infrastructure investment? I think picking up the points we've already made around risk and investment and speed. So Kate, welcome. Nice to see you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today. I mean, I would say, like Stephen, I'm an optimist, and I think on consumer confidence, we know passenger numbers are low on public transport. We know there is a risk if we get this wrong of a move to car and congestion. But I think we need to take a 50-year view. So if you look to 2050, rail can be clean and green. Public transport is, fundamental to local connectivity. Rail and public transport are part of active travel, so I think it's all much better for the future of mobility if we believe in public transport. So I was really struck by the Baroness's observation that London is the most productive part of the UK, and it's also the part of the UK with the highest use of public transport. I think we need to get the messaging right on that. I think we need to stop talking down public transport and recognise that it's also one of the safest modes of travel. I mean, I know coronavirus is difficult, and it will, probably be a longer period of time than maybe we hoped to sort of get through this current crisis. But we do need to recognise the role of public transport. I think also that in terms of investment, I was pleased that the Minister said that the integrated plan for rail will be published before Christmas, because I think one of the critical things now is that there isn't delay, that we need clarity on what the funding decisions are, what the infrastructure plan is in the North more than ever. All of the evidence from the work that the Rail Industry Association has done suggests that the more clarity of pipeline you have, the more visibility of funding, the easier it is to plan. And I'm sure that's true, for local authorities and devolved bodies as much as it is for the industry itself. I think if you know what your budget is, you can get on with your shovels in the ground, can't you? You can make things happen. And I would also, again, being an optimist, I would say, we should recognise that actually we have industry and supply chain that are global leaders here. People like McKinsey recognise the UK as being the best in the world at delivering infrastructure, along with countries like the Netherlands and Belgium. And we obviously shouldn't be complacent, but I think we have a real learning culture. And I think, Lizzie's points on diversity, I think the more we can build on that learning culture, the more we can apply the lessons rather than keep sort of learning the lessons and maybe not getting as far as doing something with them. And then my final point would be collaboration. I think one of the fantastic things that's come out of coronavirus, actually, one of the positives is that we're all talking more to each other. Events like this, where you've got the minister, you've got local councillors and leaders, and you've got representatives from the industry. I think by coming together and collaborating, that's how we will get, the best out of the decisions, the best out of the funding, and deliver the sort of aspirations that we all agree with. Actually, one more point I nearly forgot, which is social mobility. I really believe that investment in infrastructure will be good for social mobility, because if you're hiring apprentices and graduates with those sort of engineering and STEM skills, you are creating opportunities for local children and local young people to be part of the infrastructure sort of change, to be part of the success of the future. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today.
That's great. And the series is around rebalancing, and the key point around social mobility is so important to recovery. Lizzie, did you want to come back on anything that you've heard so far? Bring anybody in?
Yeah, I'm conscious of time, Jill, and I do want to get to all of our speakers. But I wondered, Jason, you had a question, I think, particularly on the funding stream, and perhaps Kevin. Just thought I might bring you in there.
Yeah, thanks. Good morning, everyone. Kevin, I was just building up on your sort of regional banks perspective, actually, and you talked about a mix of how do we get public and private sector sort of investing? And indeed, there was one of the Slido questions in that space as well. So I was interested in your views of, I suppose, two aspects really. One is, what would more longer term funding from central government mean to you? And have we got a system that's perhaps fit for purpose currently or not? And supplementary, your thoughts on the role of PPP, PFI, private sector investment, and how do we get the right balance?
Yeah, thanks very much. We haven't got the right framework in place, no doubt about it, because I think there's 18 mutual banks that are trying to get themselves established in the UK. I think the one that's furthest forward is Southwest Mutual. There's Avon Mutual and lots of others. And I've introduced those people into some of our mayors, including Ben Houchin, because I think it does need this pump priming of investment from the public sector. So probably a few £100 million. But it's investment, it's not spending. There's a big difference. And one of the most frustrating thing I think I see in Parliament is how in the past we've mixed up the two things. We mixed up day-to-day spending with investment. And as any business person knows, they are entirely different. And they go in different parts of your annual accounts, of course, as well. So balance sheet and P&L. So I think, yes, so there's two challenges. The regulatory perimeter around regional mutuals. So regulatory burden is too high. They're based upon the systemic risk that you see from the big banks, and even some of our new challenger banks like Oak North, for example, suffer from this as well. We have to, the requirements to put capital aside is really too onerous to let those banks properly become challengers, although lots of them are doing pretty well. So we need to ease the regulatory burden and make it proportionate to the risk to the wider economy, and we need to get money into them in the short term to get them going. Now, there's really good new initiatives going on now, like a British investment bank, which will be built on the kind of British Business Bank, which does some of these kind of stuff, but take a much more strategic view. So to attract money, there's a guy, one of my colleagues here, Gareth Davis, who's an MP who's got an investment banking background, has put a paper together that's just released today, actually, talking about how we set up a British investment bank that would basically issue bonds, would attract investment, it would give obviously returns to investors, attract the capital, and they would find funding projects that are going to produce a return, be that infrastructure, or be that it could be broadband, it could be roads, it could be trains, whatever else. But also it could be a great vehicle for this. So it could raise significant amounts of money to go into SME banking. And we know SME banking, if it's done properly, and not this kind of way our big banks tend to do, which throw a load of money at it in the good times and pull it all back in the bad times. Take a more handles banking approach, which is a more consistent approach, patient capital. SME banking is profitable. So, and these are mutuals, of course, so the profits get reinvested. Germany, they've got 1,500 of these things. In Wisconsin, in the US, there are 159 banks, mutual banks in Wisconsin. Wisconsin is the same size as Yorkshire in terms of population. And this is what they do. They support SMEs through these kind of fluctuations, through the economic cycles, which is what we need. A good point on PFI. I hadn't really considered that as another kind of mechanism for that. PFI's got a bit of a dirty phrase in here, I think, because of some of the past PFI, and I know the kind of reform stuff is much better. So that also, you're right, I need to look at that, could play a part in this.
I think it's time, isn't it, to sort of reimagine everything, particularly on investment, funding, risk, and how we can get things moving. We've just been too slow to think about how we could do things differently. So anyway, I'm going to move on because I'm very
Jill, there was another point as well. I'm really keen that we get to hear from Henry, from I know David's up next, and also Tim, just in terms of, I suppose there's been some issues or points raised around TFN, kind of Northern Powerhouse. So just to make sure we get to them within the time available.
I think if we bring in then, we should say Lorna, because Lorna's HS2, obviously. So maybe if we could bring in order, Jonathan.
Henry's got his camera on, so I think he's ready to go.
Yeah, so we're going to bring in Jonathan, David, and Henry. You're there. Okay, get ready. And the questions are all on the chat. Okay, Henry. Mute.
in a car in Wakefield, I might need you to slightly prompt me on the questions because I'm struggling slightly to see them all. But I think my my reflections on what's been said about the Northern Powerhouse and the need to deliver projects ourselves, I think, are very well made. So I think the Baroness's argument, which was that fundamentally that TFN can't be a talking shop, it has to have real powers, is fundamentally correct, because these institutions were not set up to be campaigning organisations, because we can campaign for infrastructure as much as we want. The whole point of having a subnational transport body was to, over time, take on more responsibility for delivering schemes. And I think that if NTAC, in the meantime, means that we can co-client on projects like TRU, which is something we suggested back in 2008, I think the Transport Acceleration Council provides a mechanism to have some additional kind of co-decision-making power to get really geeky with central government. But in the longer term, what we want is real devolution. And the same way our metro mayors, through transforming cities, want to take full responsibility for local transport funding, the aim has to be that there shouldn't be a Highways England budget for the North. There shouldn't be a Network Rail budget for the North. Those agencies should work for the North. We should prioritise our schemes. We should be the ones ensuring that we get the economic outcomes we need from that infrastructure. And I think that the Baroness made a very good point. I think what Kevin was saying about what has been achieved and the change in the government's mindset and what the Chancellor could achieve for us in the next few years, I think is very true. And I think that Andrew's remarks reflects a government that takes this seriously, but it is a double-edged sword. We need greater investment and we need long-term transfer of power. It's both together. And I think that the Chancellor's very much in our corner. I'm not convinced after today's FT story about the devolution white paper being delayed for a few months that everyone in number 10s was convinced. And I think that I'd be really frank in saying that the voices of angels within government need to win. And Rob Jennings and Rishi Sunak can't give up, because the reality is that transport is playing its part, but transport alone will not raise northern productivity, and it won't raise productivity in our city regions. And North Yorkshire has an oven-ready deal with York. We want to see that pursued, because the transport issues, getting people from Scarborough to York, right, are fundamental to York's growth. Because if more people from Scarborough could drive to York or get a train there, then we wouldn't have the same challenges attracting the workforce. So it's a kind of blunt point that the reality is we need to see the whole of government being as positive as Andrew was on this call today. And if we saw that, I'd be a very happy person, and I think the northern business community would be very happy. Sadly, not everyone is as committed as those northern MPs that Kevin mentioned, and the whole government need to get with the programme, because I don't think that levelling up can wait for them to be able to address these issues. We need the whole cabinet thinking the way that Rishi does and the way that Andrew was talking earlier.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of people will be saying, hear, hear, Henry, well said, on this call. Can I just bring in Jonathan, David, and Tim Woods also on the call, just to sort of come back on the points that Jenny Randerson made around the role of TFN and the Northern Transport Accelerator and Integrated Rail Plan, and then we'll go to Lorna and Mike Emmerich. So I'm keen to get them in. Get them in. Okay.
Jill, as I left TFN about 12 months ago, I'll probably leave this one and take my place further back on the agenda, if that's okay. But I've got a feeling what David's going to say, but I'm not going to step on his toes.
Okay. Okay. So I'll bring in David. David, are you there? Unmute. I can't see you. Okay. Tim, are you there? It's all gone quiet on TFN.
Well, maybe I will say something.
Yeah, I think you will say something.
So I think just on the TFN and the NTAC issue. So my role at TFN and David's role beyond that has been to develop a long-term program. So we published 18 months ago the first 30-year regional transport strategy and a 30-year investment program. Like Henry's saying, what you want is government to commit to deliver that program. What NTAC is doing, and where TFN are now working with NTAC, and should be working with NTAC, is to decide in what order and how quickly you do it, and the role of delivery bodies and devolution in making that happen quicker. So I don't think the fundamental role of TFN when it was set up, Jill, which was to set out the programme has changed. I think the role now we're all talking about is how do you deliver that programme in the most effective, quickest, aligned to other things where you can possibly do. And I think that's the role of the Northern Transport Acceleration Council, and devolution has a fundamental role within that. Is that okay to answer the question? And then shall I come back to my other question later on then, Jill?
Well, we could, unless we've got Tim or David there, we'll probably move on to Lorna, if that's okay, from HS2. Lorna, are you there?
I'm there, yes, or here.
So your question, obviously, inevitably, is about what's going to happen with HS2, and it'd be great to hear what you, about the point around investor confidence as well. Okay.
Yes, okay, so thank you, and thank you for inviting me to join. Apologies, everybody, I'm not going to put my camera on. I'm saving you that, because my Wi-Fi here in the Cotswolds is absolutely appalling, and if I put my camera on, I'm guaranteed to lose you. So my apologies for that. So let me just start trying my best not to obviously recover ground, because I'm very aware of time. So with regards to government commitment, I mean, as I sit here today, it's been quite a year for HS2. This time last year, we didn't even know actually if we would make it through Recovery and out the other side. We had some nervous times, to say the least. We did get confirmation early this year from government, which was wonderful news. And since then, we have progressed at pace. So we've had our notice to proceed for phase 1. So that gave us the authority to appoint our main works civil contracts, which means we have really got started in HS2. And already they've awarded over £12.5 billion of contracts to the market. And that, I think, is a very key point in this conversation today. We've also had an instruction to develop the Western Leg Bill of 2B for Parliament, as our Minister said, for early 22, which again gives us the confidence and gives the market the confidence that the government do indeed mean that they are going to commit to this. And our 2A bill, which has had a slightly longer journey in parliamentary passage than we would have hoped, over a year late now through various events, not least the election. We are really optimistic that we should get royal assent for that by the end of this year, if not very early next year. Now that alone, I think, shows real commitment by government to HS2. I think also we mustn't forget that both HS2 and Northern Powerhouse really have the ability to change the economic geography of the country and be that catalyst for growth by bringing in the cities and regions across Britain and bringing them closer together. They will maximise that investment from the north to the Midlands and really open up further opportunity for millions. HS2 has always been more than about delivering a railway. It's the biggest social and economic regeneration project we've seen in this country for decades. So make no mistake, we are very aware in these uncertain times that we have a real role to play. Not least because almost 10% of jobs in the UK are within the construction and engineering sectors, which I know has been touched on by previous speakers. NPR and HS2 over the next circa 20 years will be providing thousands of jobs. That will be critical for the recovery of our economy. When we're at full capacity in construction, we will have up to 30,000 people in the UK working across HS2, and including 350 apprentices, both within our organisation and other companies. We've awarded contracts to 2,000 different companies, and of those, 98% are from the UK, and 2/3 of those are SMEs. So we recognise we have a very important part to play in building back better. We also have a role in UK meeting its low carbon world and new net zero economy. As we know, in 2017, in the UK, transport was the largest carbon emitter for the first time. 91% of transport emissions were from road. Rail was less than 1%. And what we're now looking at in HS2 is that once we fully decarbonise our energy supply, we will actually be promoting a zero carbon activity. Now, you may say, well, that's fine once you've delivered, but what about the long construction period you've got ahead? We're working hard on that as well. And we, equivalent for phase 1's delivery, are looking at 1 month's road transport emissions in total over all the duration of years for delivery of HS2. So I genuinely believe we have a real role as well in building this long-term sustainable solution, not just a short shelf life, but actually making sure that we meet our zero carbon to 2050 and beyond. And my final point, very conscious of time, is the point about joining up and integration. And I couldn't support that more fully. Both Kate and the Minister have mentioned that in particular. We have been working collectively with TfN and Network Rail and Highways England and, you know, all the key partners to make sure we will only be able to deliver this in total collectively together. And we fully support the integrated rail plan, working closely with the department and the NIC to get the best outcome for the country. Because we recognise without working together, we simply won't realise the benefits or indeed contribute to the levelling up agenda the government wants. And I'll stop there.
Yeah, thanks very much.
I think that's a really helpful kind of context and scene setting. And there's a couple of points you touched on there that I just wanted to bring Penny Marshall in from the ICE, kind of referencing the jobs. And I'd also love, we're talking about integration and modes and bringing them together. I'd love to get that ports angle in from Matthew as well. So I wonder if we could just go to Penny and Matthew.
Yeah. Penny?
Are you on mute, Penny? No, perhaps Matthew?
Matthew Grigor, are you there, Matthew?
Yes, I'm here.
Lovely, okay.
Oh yeah, happy to give a perspective from ports. Really interesting discussion so far, which I think has given rise to some quite important questions actually. For background, ABP is the UK's largest ports operator. We have 4 ports in the Humber, which are important trading gateways for businesses across the north and in the wider economy. So collectively, those ports handle £75 billion worth of trade every year, which makes them the largest ports complex in the UK. And they support jobs in not just Hull and Cleethorpes and Grimsby, but also in cities across the north. I think that's a role that's only going to become more important as the UK transitions next year into a new trading relationship with Europe, and the potential that brings for some disruption in ports in the southeast in particular. So clearly achieving these objectives that we've been discussing today about growth and decarbonisation, we need to take into account how do we more efficiently and in cleaner ways move and transport goods and freight around the country as well as people. So I guess my question really openly is would be how do we prioritise and deliver infrastructure and policies that are needed to ensure that businesses in the north have resilient and low carbon routes to market going forward.
And can we go also straight to Penny?
Super, I hope you can hear me now. So we've heard a lot from a number of speakers about devolution and about where the responsibility for certain elements of delivery best sit, and I'd like to broaden the conversation a little bit. The Baroness talked about not treating transport in isolation and the importance of bringing it together with our energy supply, with our housing policies. And at ICE, we've looked at a whole range of these areas in recent years. And the one thing that comes out very strongly from each of our policy interventions is that we need a system of systems approach to delivering infrastructure, and we can't just look at transport on its own. Decarbonisation of transport, for example, has significant impact on the energy sector, And if we start putting all of that together, I'd like to know what the panel think, whether subnational transport bodies like TfN should actually be expanded to cover all of our infrastructure so that they can provide advice and give us the things that we need to foster the economic regeneration of the North. Because whilst transport is hugely important, it's not the only game. And I think there's an awful lot more that we need to think about together.
That's great. Very good point. I'm very conscious that we need to go to Mike Emmerich from Metro Dynamics, and perhaps if we can have time to go to Jonathan. There's a few things particular questions around decarbonisation and the jobs and skills to build to really get this economy, the Northern economy working. So can I bring in Mike, and then I think I'll end with you, Jonathan, because I think David and Tim have seemed to have dropped off the call. So that's the running order, and then we'll have one quick roundup, which will be David's question, which is name your priority, and then we'll say goodbye. Okay, so Mike.
Thanks, Jill. I want to agree with something Kevin said earlier very strongly, which is, if railways fixed productivity problems, Doncaster will be a more prosperous place than it is. And the fact is, that's probably true of of Liverpool and Newcastle too. Arguably two of the northern cities that have got the best commuter rail infrastructure, with the metro in Newcastle and good rail in Liverpool, much better than Manchester and Leeds have had historically. Yet Manchester and Leeds are more successful. So the lesson we take from that is that transport doesn't fix things. The absence of transport absolutely makes things worse or stops things getting better. In the end, all of that we've been talked about today is about making places work better. They're the arteries through which the blood of trade and people getting to and from their jobs flows, and that's why I think this is central. And we've got to think very carefully about the complementary policies that go alongside transport. So a few very quick thoughts because of time. The first, Rishi Sunak's got too light a ride in this conversation for my money. He may be a Northern MP, and he has certainly done a great job over the first part of the crisis, but we stand on the edge of a precipice. And those of us who lived through the 1980s in the north of England knows what happens when your economy goes off the precipice. You suffer scarring of capital and human capacity that never comes back. And I think he's got more work to do in the next phase of this crisis. As some very practical suggestions, for people who are coming off furlough, whose jobs have gone and where the restructuring's got to happen, why we're not seeing recruitment in people into the transport system to make it feel safer. Because I, for one, getting on a tram or a train and worried about overcrowding. Why we're not seeing temporary jobs in making the transport system seem better. We need to not lose capacity. We are going to lose our nighttime economy in the big cities. We're going to lose arts and culture. We've already got an R&D tax, an R&D deficit in the north of England. A restructuring of the furlough system can, should, and in my view must be used, because they're the people who use the transport system, and without them, there's no point in having the railways or anything else. So we need to keep the economic engines burning. On this, I'd slightly disagree a little with Kevin. We've got to prioritise. We've always got to prioritise in transport. And if we let the economic engines of the cities and the conurbations that have driven the north, if we let those fires go out, we will be back generations. And the towns that are part of their travel to work areas won't recover either. So prioritisation, keeping the economic fires burning in cities is vital, as well as making sure that everybody benefits from that. People have mentioned inward investment and North Shoring hasn't had much of a shout so far. These are the things that will matter. In the end, we've got a jobs deficit and we've got a skills deficit. We need to top up the level of really good quality jobs through inward investment, North Shoring, and I think we can but welcome the admittedly vague promises from the Prime Minister yesterday about lifetime skills commitments and adult education, all of which will be vital for getting people onto the transport systems of the north. One final point, a bit of an outlier. Remember Nick Crafts, the economist, once saying that we never saw the productivity gains from railways in the 19th century until third-class rail travel was introduced. Now, those of us who travel across the north know that it's all pretty third-class to start with. But what third-class rail travel did do in the north was bring the cost down for working people so that they could start to use the railways. If we really wanted to boost the north, we'd be looking at the price of travelling on transport as well as the infrastructure itself.
Yeah, here. That's what I say. So I think we're in a situation now. I've still got to bring people in, but I'm gonna switch around the order. So I'm going to go to Jonathan Spruce. If you can mention a bit about decarbonisation, that would be good. But I want to ask you all, as far as we can get, what transport innovation, what's your priority for the Northern Powerhouse, really, in terms of building back better transport? And obviously, the quicker, the better. And I also want to bring Angeliki in as well. And then I'll ask Lizzie to come back and sum up. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure, Jill. I think realistically, some people will have to log off at 11:30, given that was the end of the session. So just a huge thank you to the speakers and the listeners and the questions. You know, for anyone that does have to go at 11:30, it's been a really great hour and a half, and contributions very much appreciated. But if anybody does want to stay for those final discussions and debate, fantastic.
Yeah. Okay. So Jonathan, Angeliki, and we'll have just a quick priority session, and do stay on and do what you want. Like, so Jonathan, sorry, time's gone against us, but it's been really good so far.
Don't worry, Jill. Honestly, it's about fostering debate. So how do we decarbonise? So I think there's two main points about how do we decarbonise. The first thing is we need to learn the lessons from the pandemic, but also we can't deviate from the course we'd set before the pandemic. So in terms of learning lessons, things like locking in the benefits we've seen from active travel. So this real move towards active travel and this understanding about how we can get people moving in a different way and out of their cars. But we need to lock that in quickly, because now, because of the messaging around public transport in particular, you've got a real increase in car travel going back and sometimes beyond its previous levels. So locking that in is a real key. We need to understand we're not going to go back, I think, to where we were before. What we knew before a year ago will never happen again. And I think what we've all gained learning the lesson is flexibility. So we need our infrastructure to be flexible. And that means, again, using better use of it. So when we deploy things like new infrastructure, like a new railway line or a new piece of tarmac, it's how do you flexibly use that to flex to demand, and that will reduce the overall carbon emissions and reduce the carbon footprint of that sort of infrastructure. We make as best use of that infrastructure as we can. And then I think we've touched on this as well. There's a growing role for smaller towns as well. So Kevin's constituency being Thirsk and Moulton, there's a real role and a renaissance for towns like Thirsk in terms of the market towns, of how people use that town maybe 2 or 3 days a week, where they commute into Leeds or commute into York before. So that idea about how you grow those towns or those shorter journeys again and use that again, so we reduce our carbon footprint, becomes really, really crucial, because that's a win-win. That's an economic win, and it's also a decarbonisation win. So using those lessons is quite good. In terms of not deviating, we have to continue the role of reforming the Green Book and recognising the Levelling Up agenda, and recognising again how decarbonisation should play a role in that choice. We have to continue devolution. And again, we've talked a lot today about how devolution and people understand more local decisions taken locally can help that. And Penny's right, that joined up infrastructure. So that idea of joining up between housing, energy and transport, doing them things in silos will not give you the reduction in carbon that we need. So if we are going to more work from home, how do you provide that energy at home? How do you provide that infrastructure at home? What does that mean for energy? What does that mean for our housing quality? What does that mean for our quality of place, so we don't need to drive as much to get to where we want to be? So it's that complete systems approach to infrastructure, which is much better done locally. And then finally, and I think this comes out, part of what I prioritize is that it is about a long-term stability. So setting that long-term pipeline will help private and public sector plan to deliver. And again, that will give you efficiencies, that will help you accelerate the roll towards decarbonisation. And as an SME, one of the things we crave is that stability and certainty, so that we can plan for taking people on, we can plan for growth, we can build up that economy at a local level. And then we can take the skills on, and we can get that pipeline of skills that we need, and we can get those skills in the right areas that we need to decarbonize. But we need that long-term plan. So TfN set that plan out. So it is about now sticking to that plan, committing to that plan, and working locally to deliver that plan in the most effective and efficient way possible.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much, Jonathan, for doing that so quickly as well. I'm just going to I think we've got to wind up really, because Angelique has actually had to go. So I just wondered if I'm going to throw it back to you, Lizzie, to wind up and also just sum up. Really.
Yeah, so first of all, as I said a moment ago, thank you so much for your active contribution and participation. Some really great perspectives and ideas here. I think the piece that is left with me is leadership and collaboration. What we're talking about is complexity. We're talking about multiple competing agendas. We're talking about, a dearth of bodies, of process, of governance, and I think the piece that really I am left with is the need for the UK to really invest in some fantastic and strong leaders. And I do believe that diverse leaders, diverse experiences, diverse perspectives, and having those leaders collaborate to create common visions, to create common goals, to bring this thing to life and actually deliver on the ground, as the Baroness referred to, some achievements, some results, whilst holding that long-term vision and making it happen. For me, I think, you asked about our priorities. I think that has to be one of the things, alongside the skills, alongside the decarbonisation, that we must bring to life in the UK when we're talking about delivering these really important transport schemes. So thank you, Jill. Thank you all, very much appreciated. I hope you've enjoyed this morning. I know I certainly have. On behalf of Atkins, thank you, Jill. Thank you all. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lizzie. And
thank you, Lizzie.
We've got one more to go before the findings, so do tune in to the next one, which is Build. But thank you to all our speakers and contributors. You're fantastic. And it's great to have such a message that we are almost on the same page. All right. Okay. Thank you very much. All. Good to see you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.